have to have people in my life that are not an outflow, and they don't stress me out that I feel like I have to like perform or live up to certain standards. And some of the pastors I've seen that I've loved dearly that have spun out have not been in a community like that. And when they have bad ideas, they don't have anybody to tell them it's not a good idea.
Yes. Welcome to the Church Systems Podcast, where we give you simple solutions to help you tackle ministry's toughest challenges. I'm Henry Tolbert, and I'm your host. And today, we're going to be talking about something that is so important, especially in this season of the church. We're going to be talking about the silent struggle. We're going to be helping you really figure out how to navigate through your burnout and how to come out on the other side. You know, one of the primary reasons that so many leaders are leaving the ministry is because of burnout. And we saw this really take off during the pandemic. It was multiplied because the stresses and the challenges were so increased that it really just fast forwarded a ton of timelines. I saw a recent stat that said over the next 10 to 15 years, 1 in 4 pastors are going to be walking through a transition. That is an absolutely massive number. And a part of it is around burnout, is that pastors are just tired. They've had to do a lot. They've had to wrestle with a lot. And so today we're going to start talking about what burnout really is. And we're going to start giving you some of the tools to help come through it. You know, I was having a recent conversation with a leader, and he said to me, man, to be honest with you, I feel like I'm just now coming out of the burnout and what I was kind of stuck in this rut. I was kind of stuck in from the pandemic. And man, when he said that, it pricked my heart. And so I want to help you navigate it. I want to help you get to the other side of it. I want to help you come through it so that you can start moving forward into what God wants you to do. All right. So let's dive in. So when we talk about the silent struggle, really what we're acknowledging is that as pastors, there are some things that we go through and experience that, to be quite honestly, the average person may not understand. You know, I remember sharing with another pastor that, I feel like people really struggle with hearing about the struggles of their spiritual leader. They know we're human and they know we have stuff going on, but a lot of times they don't know what to do with it. They don't know what to say. They don't know how to encourage us, because to them, we're these spiritual heroes of sorts, right? We're Jesus Juniors, and we don't claim to be that, right? We don't say that we're that, but a lot of times that's the expectation. And unfortunately, what that means is that you could spend your entire week visiting sick people and not get visits when you get sick. It means that you can spend so much time pouring into others that you maybe not even have anything left for yourself. And we know this and we see it a lot. We typically call it burnout. And we talk about really what it means to be burnt out. You know, burnout is when I am physically, mentally, emotionally just exhausted. And a lot of times it's driven by stress that just never lets up. You know, we can handle a moment of stress, right? We can handle a moment of this and that, but it's when that stress is nonstop that everything changes. I remember as a kid, I've always had a love for roller coasters and thrill rides and things of that nature. So I remember going to this one theme park, and we caught the theme park on a day where it wasn't a whole lot of people there, which meant that not only could I ride the roller coaster, but I could ride it as much as I wanted. And I remember the first time I rode it, man, it was so awesome. It was amazing. And it was probably still good, probably the first 5 or 6 times I rode it. But after about the 15th time, it just felt stressful. I remember I started to get a headache from all the screaming and all the things. And this thing that once used to be so fun, all of a sudden started to hurt me physically. And it wasn't just that it was stress. It was that the stress had been prolonged for longer than it was built. There's a reason that roller coasters typically last, 45 to 90 seconds. There's a reason that they're quick. There's a reason that they don't last a long time. And what happens with burnout is that the stress stays so long that we just become mentally, physically, emotionally, even spiritually exhausted. And so more specifically, when we think about burnout for pastors, it really comes down to just the constant demands of ministry that never seem to go away, right? You've heard the phrase Sunday's coming, and those I remember getting those Monday blues because you finish off of the high of a Sunday, we finished, we did this, we got it done, and you wake up the next day and realize, man, I got to do this all over again. Right? I got to go right back into it. Sometimes it's the overloaded schedule. Many pastors are bivocational. So you're working a full-time job in one place, but ministry itself is still a full-time job. And you've got a family, you've got a wife who needs attention. You've got kids who are involved in activities. And then on the back end of all of that, you've got the stuff you like to do and the stuff you enjoy to do. And all of those things, man, when we get to a point where we feel like we've got to carry these burdens along, it starts to turn into burnout. And, when we talk about burnout, I want to share just some of the ways you can recognize burnout. Now, this is not a comprehensive list, but here are some of the signs that burnout might be showing up in your life. Number one is what I call everything exhaustion. Everything exhaustion. Now, what I mean by that is you're just drained and overwhelmed, and even if you rest, feels like you can't recharge. I've been there where, I say, man, I need a few days away, and I get away for a few days, and all I do is sleep all day, every day. But no matter how much I sleep, I still wake up tired. No matter how much I rest, it feels like I'm still just worn out and worn down. It's everything exhaustion. And I call it everything exhaustion because it's not just physical. It's mental, it's emotional, it's social, it could be spiritual. It's all of these things, right? You just get everything exhaustion where you just come to a point where it's like, look, man, I'm just tired of everything. And I started to notice it when I would struggle and I was just tired of making simple decisions. I was tired of making simple decisions. Like, I don't want to do it. It's just everything exhaustion. That's one of the signs of burnout. Another thing that you get when you're facing burnout is just a deep desire to connect. Man, when I was going through this, I found myself constantly saying, I need to get away. I want to get away. I want to get away. I want to get away. And even when I would get away and go on vacations, as soon as I got back, I was already planning the next one and looking forward to the next one. And I'm not saying vacations are bad. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is below that for me was a deep desire to disconnect from everything. Sometimes I would even get home and the first thing I wanted to do is just get off somewhere by myself, stay alone, and be away. Even here's how I really recognize it in me. As a pastor, I got to the point where I used to find joy standing out and talking to people and hugging people and loving people. And that was a window where I came out right before it was time to preach. And when the sermon was over, I was going back in because I got to get ready for the next service. And I just saw, man, so much of the joy that I had for being with people and around people was exchanged for this desire to just completely detach and disconnect. Because it got to the point where relationships were exhausting. And for me, I had a fear because this as well as I do as a pastor. You never know what is going to come out of somebody's mouth in one of those conversations that you're having at church. I've had some people bring me the craziest stuff right before service. I'm getting ready to go and preach. They bring their complaints and their disdain with me for something that I said that, a joke I made that they didn't find funny, right? You just never know. And so for me, it became this fear of, listen, I don't need anybody else putting anything on my mind, putting anything else on my plate, bringing me another problem. And it was just this deep desire to disconnect. I even got to the point where I became more pessimistic than optimistic. I was always this optimistic person who believed the best, and eventually that started to shift. And for me, that was a sign of my burnout. The third and final sign that I'll share is what I call hamster wheel hangover. The hamster wheel hangover. It feels like no matter what you do, you just can't make movement, right? Or at least you see it that way. You struggle to see progress. You could be surrounded by other people who are like, man, this was so great. You're doing so good. And you're like, I don't see it. And you start to really wrestle with whether or not your work is in vain. You start to wrestle with whether or not you're being effective. You can be in a place, and this can happen at any stage of ministry. You can be at a church where the people love you and they feel like it's going well, and you're sitting there and you're going like, man, we're not making progress. Like, is this even working? And you really, unintentionally sometimes you start going down the list of all the things in your life and just asking like, man, is it really working? And sometimes, especially for me, it came with feelings of inadequacy. Even in places where other people were telling me I was doing a good job, because I couldn't see progress, I felt like a failure. Because I couldn't see progress, I'm sitting there and I'm going like, here I am, completely spent. I've given everything, and I feel like I have nothing to show for it. That was a sign of my burnout, is I started to feel like I wasn't making a difference. And here's the truth of the matter, is that yes, you need to recharge. That's the truth of the matter. The truth of the matter is you need more connections. You just maybe need a different kind of connection, but you need more connections. The truth of the matter is you are making a difference, but when you're in that space that feels like burnout, you can't see it. And so what we've got to figure out is, how do we get to the other side of that? How do we address this silent struggle? Because if I go and take all of that stuff to somebody in our congregation, they either will blow it off, not understand. Maybe they do understand and they try their best to help, but that's a problem they can't solve. Or maybe in a worst case scenario, it gets used against me. It gets used in a way that kind of discredits who I am and what I'm called to do, because we've seen that happen too. So how do we deal with this silent struggle? How do we come out of burnout if we're in it? Or how do we put in place a plan to avoid and recover from burnout if we're not in it? How do we stay out of it? How do we make sure we protect ourselves from it? Well, there are 5 things I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you 5 things that I want to challenge you to do that's going to help you. And I want you to take good notes, because I'm going to give you the resources and the tools that you need to make this happen, all right? Number 1, the first thing that I want to challenge you to do is let some things go. And we talked about this a little bit in the last episode, but I want to go a little deeper into this because I can guarantee you that you're carrying more things than you should. I can guarantee you've got more things on your plate than you should have on your plate. And so I want to challenge you to let some things go, but what do you let go? So here's what I want you to do. If you did your assignment that I gave you in the last episode, you've already started making a list of all the things or the tasks and responsibilities that are on your plate. But now I want to give you a ranking system or a grading system for the tasks that you have, all right? So we're going to label everything as priority 1, priority 2, and priority 3. All right, here's what that means. When we talk about priority 1 or P1, these are things that only you can do, right? These are things that are so specifically tasks that are so specific that you're the only one who can do them, right? That they primarily fall to you, that somebody else can maybe do it here and there, but primarily that's something that's going to be on your plate. In most churches, preaching would fall into this category. It doesn't have to, but that's just the way it is for most churches, right? Preaching is a P1. Leading the leadership team, that's a P1, priority 1, right? All those things are P1. So I want you to label some tasks priority 1, and P1 means you're the one who has to do these tasks, right? You're the only one who can do it. But then number 2, I want you to label some stuff priority 2 or P2. That means only someone who is trained can do them. These are more specialized tasks that you have to know what you're doing, right? The average person can't go back and work the soundboard, right? That's a P2 task. Somebody has to be trained. They have to know what they're doing back there, or else they'll really mess some stuff up, right? So I want you to think about the P2, priority 2 task. And then I want you to label some tasks P3. And those are priority 3, which means just about anyone could do it. Anybody that you give enough instruction and enough clarity could then go and do it. And I want you to label all of the tasks on your list. What's P1, what's P2, and what's P3, all right? P1, P2, and P3. And now here comes the hard part. I want you to commit to only doing P1 task. I want you to commit that, man, the P2 and the P3, I'm going to pass those off to somebody else. I'm going to let somebody else do it, right? Or if I don't have somebody else to do it, I'm going to seriously consider letting it go for a season. I was working with a pastor recently, and I was talking to him about this because he's tired. He's trying to recover. He said to me, man, I still feel like I'm trying to recover from the pandemic. Like I'm still tired, exhausted, all these kind of things. And I said to him, I said, all right, here's one of the things I want you to do. I said, as you get ready to go into the summer, as you get ready to go into this new season, one of the things that I want you to do is I want you to take your midweek Bible study and I want you to turn it into an online Bible study. I just want you to give yourself the freedom to not have to drive over to the church and make sure everything is set up and be worried about worship and music and be worried about all these different things, and to set yourself up for the disappointment when enough people don't show up after all the sacrifice it takes you. Because that's one of the things that hits us that we don't talk about a lot. It is, in some cases, we don't even mind doing the hard work, but is it appreciated? Right? Is there a return on it? Right? If I do this, do people come? See, for the average person, Bible study is just drive over to the church, be there for an hour and leave. For the pastor, it's a couple of hours of study, plus going over to the church, setting things up, making sure it's right, preaching and doing it. Everybody leave, you stay, still have to make sure that everything is right, put up, locked up, closed up, and then going home. So what might be a 90-minute task for somebody else can easily become a 10-hour task for you. And so I challenge this pastor. I say, I want you to shut that down and just do your Bible study online from your house. Do a Bible study lesson, a small group, or whatever, however you want to do it. I said, just give yourself some space to put that down for a season. You know, he thought, man, what if a new person show up? They can show up online. Give yourself the space for just a season to just catch your breath. And that comes with picking up only P1 tasks. Listen, it is not fruitful to wear yourself out doing things that really require a team for them to be done well. I know you're tough. I know you're Superman. Depending on what day you catch me, I'm going to have my Captain America shirt on because I feel like I'm a super soldier. But there are still some things I can't do on my own. And the same is true for you. You want to break out of this silent struggle, you have got to be honest about the tasks that are P1, P2, and P3, and you've got to commit to doing nothing but P1 tasks. Number two, after you let some things go, the second thing you need to do is you need to delegate some responsibilities. You need to delegate. You need to empower some other people to take on responsibilities. I never forget when I first became a pastor, one of my uncles who had been a pastor for many years, he said to me, he said, Henry, let those people do some of that stuff. And we weren't talking about anything in particular. And I was like, what do you mean? He says, if the bathrooms need tissue, let the people pick it up. If you need paper towels, let the people pick it up. He says, let the people do some of that stuff, because if not, some of those small tasks will wear you out. Some of those small tasks will wear you out. And so this is not a problem of pride. This is not, oh, I'm too good to do this. Because, you know, I'm one of those old school pastors who cut my teeth on doing everything. I cut my teeth on cleaning bathrooms. I cut my teeth on setting up our plastic chairs every weekend. I cut my teeth. We would rent our chairs from an event center because we didn't have any when our church started growing. And I cut my teeth on coming in with Clorox wipes and wiping the alcohol and the sweat off the chairs from the event that they had the week before. I cut my teeth on those things. So this is not an issue of pride, but this is an issue of learning to delegate, of learning the value of community, the value of team, the value of getting help. And so what you've got to do is you've got to learn to pass off some of these tasks. And I know that's a bad word to some pastors, delegation. We want things done right, and we want things done with the right spirit. And so what I'm challenging you is to learn how to transition from doing things well to leading things well, or to coaching people well, right? It can still be done with excellence. It can still be done with the right heart. Just communicate that to the person who you're delegating to. You want to learn how to delegate because it's going to be a huge part of what you do. And I'm not just asking you to flippantly give stuff away. One of the things, here's a trick that I'll give you to help you learn to delegate, because we see this a lot with the pastors in our church systems boot camp. And this is one of the things I have to fight through, and I have to look at pastors and say, hey, I need you to do this. So here's one of the tricks that we use to help pastors delegate is we say delegate with boundaries. Delegate with boundaries. In our boot camp, we have a document that we created, and we give it to all of our pastors as a template. And we say, anytime you delegate, answer these 9 questions about what you're delegating. And when you do that, it's going to give you more of a release in your spirit to actually hand it off, because you're going to know you communicated clearly what you're asking that person to do. You've told them what you want them to do. You've given them all the necessary details. They understand what's expected, all these kinds of things, just by answering those questions. And you give it to them, and then they can take the thing and they can go. And basically what you're saying with that document is, here's the fence, here's the yard. As long as you stay within this fence, you have at it in the yard. You go and be who you're called to be. You bring your unique creativity. You bring your unique gifts, because I want you to feel the freedom to be who you are, right? Because I don't want you to feel like a puppet, like you just do exactly what I tell you to do or whatever it is. I want you to bring who you are to the task, but I need it to be done within this framework. Here are the things that are off limits. Here are the things you can do. You want to put it in front of them. That's one of the ways that you can delegate. If you trust that you have communicated with clarity, then you can allow things to go forward. You know, when you don't communicate with clarity, a couple of things can happen. One, the task cannot be completed or done correctly. You know, you go through the frustration of, man, I gave them this to do and I ain't even do it right, or it didn't happen, or whatever it is. The second thing that can happen if you don't delegate with boundaries and with clarity is that people will go and do the task, but they come back to you every step of the way. And eventually you come to the mindset, well, if I got to tell you what to do every step of the way, I might as well just do it myself. The way to avoid that is to delegate with boundaries. And within the boot camp, we give you a document to help you do that. All right. So you need to delegate. Number 3, here's a third thing that you can do to break the silent struggle is you need to join a community. You need to join a community. Man, I cannot tell you how valuable it is to connect with pastors and mentors and counselors and people who just help you see that you don't have to carry the burden alone. I cannot tell you how valuable that is. It makes such a difference in your life that it will really blow your mind. Being in a community with other pastors gives you the freedom to be around a group of peers who you know can handle your truth. You know, here's, another part of the silent struggle is we're not sure people can handle our truth. We're not sure people can handle it. If our congregation can handle it, if we tell them we're disappointed with God. We don't know that they can handle it if we can tell them that we're angry at somebody else on the team and we're mad about that. We don't know if they can handle it if we say to them like, man, I would really love to dismiss and kick this person out of the church because they shouldn't be here anymore. In those temporary moments where our humanity flares up and seems to, even for just a second, overtake our divinity, we need a safe place. I never forget my pastor saying to me, I called him about this particular issue I was having in the church, and I was frustrated, and I was ready to let these people and write them a letter asking them to leave the church because they were causing this and that and the other. And I remember I said to him, man, this is what I'm going to do. He said, oh, man, that's messed up. And I said something else. He said, man, that's so bad. I said, man, they did this. He said, what? They did what? And eventually I caught on that he was being a little bit sarcastic. And finally I chuckled, because I was in tears screaming in my truck as I was talking to him. And finally I caught on and I laughed and he says, okay. He said, you finished? I said, yeah, I needed to get that out. He says, all right, here's what you're going to do. You're going to go and handle this the way the word of God says handle it. So you're going to go and sit with that person and you're going to meet with them and you're going to let them know you love them. And you're going to tell them the truth in love, and you're going to let them know what the Bible requires of you and of them, and you're going to walk them through the process. And man, just having a place to be heard, where somebody wasn't hearing me and saying, well, no, you shouldn't be like that, or you shouldn't feel this way. It's like, how do you tell yourself not to feel what you feel? Instead, sometimes what you need is somebody who allows you the freedom to be honest about where you are, but also gives you a safe place to let you know, okay, I know right now you're saying you hate seatbelts, but it's time to get back in the car. Put your seatbelt on. Oh, I heard you. You're right. You made a great argument that seatbelts are dumb. But you know what? It's time to move. So now put your seatbelt on. If you need to get in the back seat for a little while, get in the back seat. I'll drive. But now let's do what we're called to do. That's what a community does for you. You know, I was talking with one of our boot camp members just the other day, and he's walking through this assessment where he's really assessing himself and really just kind of assessing just, you know, him doing the things that he needs to do and what's his best self and all these kind of things. And his wife had to do a section on him. And in this section, she talks about the difference in him before the boot camp and after he joined the boot camp. And she said, man, when he joined the boot camp, it changed everything because now he finally had a group of people who understood him and understood what he could see because he was saying it to us. But because we didn't think like him or we weren't in the same place, we didn't get it. When he joined the boot camp, when him and Henry got together, everything changed. And I'm telling you the same is true for you. When you get with the right group of people, everything changes. And when I say talk about getting in a community, one of the things that's so important is that you get in the right community. You know, sometimes your community isn't your denomination. You know, you can go to denominational meetings, and a denomination just means we believe, you know, mostly the same things when it comes to how we interpret scripture and things of that nature. But that doesn't mean that we're the same kind. It doesn't mean that we're thinking on the same wavelengths. It doesn't mean any of those different things. Sometimes a community is a hand-picked, boutique kind of community that fits where you are. And I'm here to tell you, there's a community out there for you. You just got to go looking for it. You know, when you get serious about finding a solution, you go searching for it, right? You go looking for what could work for you. And I'm grateful to God that we've had the opportunity to cultivate that kind of community where pastors can be honest, where they can find help and they can find the solutions, where we problem solve together. So you're not wrestling with your problem by yourself. We routinely make trips to go and visit with churches and be boots on the ground with them and say, hey, let's help you tackle this issue. Let's help walk through this because we want you to do it. Because here's what I've learned. One of the things about us as pastors is that we're built for hard times. We're built for challenges. We can handle hard stuff. You know, one of the things that hurts the most is when it feels like we've got to handle it alone. And I know the right answer. I know God is always with me. I know the Holy Spirit is always with me. You know, but it feels so much better when a person is with me. It feels so much better to know that the person who has committed their lives to serving other people has somebody who's ready to be there for them. You know, I often teach on, you know, the Jesus gifts or the fivefold gifts or those gifts from Ephesians chapter 4. And when I teach on the gift of the pastor shepherd, one of the things I always talk about is, you know, the struggle of the pastor shepherd, you know, because every gift has a byproduct that we've got to manage. It has a cost to it. And one of the costs of the heart of the shepherd is that your capacity to love is often so much greater than the people around you. Is that you love people at a capacity that most people can't match in return. And so even the people who love you differently, here you are with the 5-gallon bucket of love, loving on people who have a shot glass, which means that sometimes even when they pour into you, it's not the same amount that you would pour out into them. And it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with them. And the reason that it's that way is because the love that you have doesn't come from your capacity. It comes from the capacity of Christ. When exemplifying this gift in his life, the scripture says, or Jesus says, if I had 99 sheep who were safe and one who was lost, he said, I would leave the 99 to go and get the one. But here's the kicker. He didn't just say, go get the one. He says, and when I found the one, he said, I would gladly pick it up, put it on my shoulder, and carry it back. My goodness. That's a powerful visual. It's not just that I'm going to find it and figure out where it is and how it got there and what it went through and why did it do this and who did it. I ain't asked none of those questions. I'm going to find the sheep, I'm going to pick it up, and however far away it was, I'm going to put it on my shoulder and I'm going to carry it. Sheep aren't light. Adult sheep can be heavy. And yet Jesus says, I'm going to put it on my shoulder. It's probably going to hurt. It's going to be a long journey. It might be tiring, but I'm willing to do it because that's what a shepherd does. And here's the thing. If you're going to love at that capacity, you need to be a part of a community of people who love, accept, and appreciate you for who you are. You need to be a part of a community that's going to love you and support you and walk with you right where you are. And I want us to get this, because I know you can handle hard times, but I don't want you to have to handle them alone. So you need to join a community. It's the sense of aloneness that sometimes is the hardest for us. And so join a community so you can be a part of it. It's going to give you a safe place where you can truly be honest and know, man, this isn't just me. Just yesterday, I was talking with a leader who I paired up with another leader in our boot camp, because I said, man, you guys are, almost in the same city and you're facing the same issue. You guys need to get together and go to lunch. Because yes, I'm here to support both you guys. And one of them I went to visit because he was going through a challenge. And I said, look, man, I'm coming. And I went to go and visit him. And we spent some time together and we talked through it. And we were just there for each other. Right. But I'm saying to them now, hey, look, it's a lot of people going through the same thing. You just need to be in a group where people can be honest about it. And it takes a lot to cultivate that kind of community where people can be honest and really talk about where they are. All right. So I want you to join a community. Number 4, the fourth thing, I want you to build a best self plan. A best self plan. Here's what I mean by that, is that I want you to be intentional about making space for the things that help you be your best. For me, I've got a sense of when I'm at my best. When I can be the guy who gets up at 5 a.m, goes straight to the gym, works out, comes home from the gym, goes out on the patio with a cup of coffee, does my devotional where I read and pray and just talk to God. And by the time I finish my devotional, my kids are waking up, getting ready for school, and I go sit in the front and I wait on them. And I can share a word of encouragement with them and hug them and kiss them and then leave there and get straight to work and start doing stuff. And I get more done by lunch than most people get by the whole day. And then I go and I go to the driving range and I hit a few golf balls and all these different things, right, are a part of when I feel like I'm at my best. What is it for you? When are you at your best? I want you to build a plan for when you're at your best. I want you to think about exercise. I want you to think about hobbies. I want you to think about prayer. I want you to think about reading. I want you to think about all these different things. When are you at your best? Another way to ask that is, when was the last time you felt like you were at your best? And I want you to reverse engineer what you were doing at that time that caused you to feel that way, right? I want you to think about this on a couple different levels. I want you to think about it mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. What do you need to be your best in those 4 areas? Because you need to build a plan. If you're going to break out of this silent struggle, you've got to build a plan for each of those areas and start executing it. I'm telling you, this is one of the things that helped me come out of my silent struggle, is that I figured out what helped me be at my best. I figured out what helped me. And some of it I discovered by mistake. I was feeling in a crappy mood and I went to go and work out and I really lifted weights. And I was like, man, I'm gonna find the hardest workout I can. And to the point where I want to be exhausted by the time I leave. And I did that and I was absolutely exhausted and my body hurt and it was really, really rough. But man, something started to turn for me. Actually saying I was going to do it and going to do it turned something to me. I could feel the things in my brain, the chemicals in my brain shifting. My mood was changing, the dopamine, all those different things. I felt it happening. And so one of the things that you've got to do is you want to build your best self plan, because what you're trying to do is give yourself a chance to just see a little bit of daylight. Like, give yourself a chance to see a little bit of daylight. I was in a Facebook group for pastors just the other day, man, and a pastor came in who is 60-something years old, been pastoring a church for almost 30 years. And he says, guys, I want to be honest. I don't see a reason to keep going right now. These last 4 months have been the worst months of my life. My house got hit by a tornado. My marriage feels like it's going down the drain because we can't navigate this thing. We haven't had electricity or plumbing for so long that it is crazy to even think about it. And in the midst of going through all of that, only 2 people from our church has even called to check on us. And to see that pastor sitting there and saying like, man, none of this is worth it. I said, Lord, I'm praying, Lord, just help him see daylight. Just help him see a little daylight. Help him to see that his life is not going to be stuck in this darkness. And I'm saying the same thing for you. You got to give yourself a chance to see daylight. And all of these things that I'm talking about and I'm giving you to this point is trying to bring you to a point where you can give yourself a chance to see daylight. The 5th and final thing that I want to challenge you to do to break out of this silent struggle is I want you to reset your clock. You need to reset your clock. I'm not talking about the clock that sits by your bed or the clock that's on your phone. I'm talking about the clock in your head. I want you to reset the clock. Because as leaders, a lot of times we have this invisible clock in our head that always makes us feel like we're behind schedule. We constantly feel like we should have been there sooner. I should have been here by now. Had I done this, I'd have been there. We constantly feel like we're behind. And what ends up happening is because that clock is so abstract, you really never catch up to it. You never catch up to it. And it always just is another reason for you not to celebrate anything that you do and accomplish. And so I want to commission you to reset that clock. If you need to push a button on the side of your head, or you need to turn a knob, or whatever you need to do, I want you to reset your clock. And I want you to tell yourself that you are where you're supposed to be in this moment and in this time. I want you to do that. I want you to reset that imaginary clock over your life. And I want you to remind yourself, man, that you're living in God's timing. When you reset your clock and you start that clock again, I want you to reset it using a different system. There are 2 different kinds of time in Scripture. There's chronos, which is chronological time, and then there's kairos, which is the timing of God. Most of us set our clocks and the clocks in our heads by chronos. We set it by the calendar. We set this clock in our head that says by 40, I should do this. By 50, I should do this. By 60, I should do this. And when we set our clocks by chronos, what ends up happening is the only way that we can make that clock make sense is through comparison. The only way we can make it make sense is through comparison. And so I look at myself and I say, man, by 50, I should be here. By 50, look at such and such. They had this by 40. He's doing this by 30. He did this by this time. Comparison forces us to really look at other people and see ourselves as behind. So I don't want you to use chronos when you set this clock. As a matter of fact, this clock doesn't even have 1s and 0s and numbers on it. I want you to set your clock by kairos. Kairos is God's perfect timing. And I want you to remind yourself that that's what you're living in. That God has you where he wants you, and when he wants to take you to another place, when he wants to do new things in your life, he will do them in his timing. And that will work in conjunction with the things that you're going to do and the responsibility and your stewardship and all those different things. But I want you to set your time by kairos, because you don't have to surrender yourself to the silent struggle. And a part of that silent struggle is that clock in your head. I want you to reset that clock. I want you to give yourself a clean slate and say, right now, at this moment, I'm giving myself a reset. I don't care how old you are, if you're 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, wherever you are, reset that clock. Reset that chronos. Wipe it out and replace it with the kairos clock. And begin to ask God, what do you want me to do in this season of my life? I've stopped focusing on having a perfect understanding of my whole life. And I've started to just trust and walk with God from season to season. I do that in my relationship with God. I do it in my marriage. Ever so often, my wife and I sit with each other and we say, what do you need from me in this season? Because what you needed last season might be different from what you need this season. Let's manage from season to season. And I want you to go back to God and say, Lord, what do you want to do in my life in this season? Because I want to intentionally live in kairos. You don't have to surrender to the silent struggle. As a matter of fact, in a way, I'm inviting you to come and struggle out loud. I'm inviting you to join a community where you can still have the struggle, because in this life we will have trouble. But I'm asking you to find healing by not having to go through that struggle by yourself. I'm inviting you to step into a new way of life, a new way of leading, where your strength is not seen in how formidable you look, but your strength is seen in your ability to allow others to come around you and help you get to the other side. I want to see you come out of this silent struggle. I want to see you get to the other side. So don't just take my word for it. I want you to listen in on this conversation and see how relationships can really help make a difference in your life. So listen, I can't stress enough how valuable it is for you as a leader to be a part of a community and to have relationships that pour into you. You spend so much of your life taking care of other people, and it's important that you have people who also understand you. And so I want to bring in a friend who has been a partner of ours for, I think, well over a year now, almost 2 years. But we've really had a chance to walk through some things together. I want to introduce Pastor Ian Bullock. Hey, Pastor Ian, how are you?
Good morning.
Man, we're so glad to have you all the way from Ely, Nevada, which I had a chance to visit, and I had a chance to go out and see God Country, and it looks like what you think on TV, and it was really awesome. But I want you to chime in on this. We've been talking about struggle, and I know you all have been a part of our program for a while. I really want to start with part of this. You know, what has it been like for you and your wife, Sarah? How has, being a part of community, how have you seen that make a difference for you all?
I'm trying to think of how my wife put it. I think I was asking her some of these questions, thinking this through, and, how has that impacted us? And the thing that stuck out to her especially was finding somebody that was like-minded makes you feel less crazy, right? There's a lot of confirmation and things that are in your heart to do that, especially if it's out of the mainstream. And going after the heart of God typically is out of the mainstream. So you start to wonder, am I just making this up? And so when you encounter someone who's got some credibility and some history and some success in helping other people, and you find out, oh no, I'm not nuts, I'm on the same page, and we're going the right direction, that's incredibly affirming and brings a lot of peace.
Man, I love that. What are some of those things that really got confirmed, once we kind of connected and really having some deeper conversations?
Well, I can say the one that, at least for me, was the ability to flow in being led by the Holy Spirit, but with a plan and with intentionality, with strategy, thinking things through, particularly just those of us in the charismatic and spirit-filled communities. Sometimes it's frowned upon if you plan anything ahead of time. You're quenching the spirit. So the idea that we can be listening to the voice of God, and it turns out He can tell you things ahead of time, not as you're going. He can give you specific and clear direction. And I think the other thing I've learned from you is, at least I think had it affirmed, is the ability to, Chris Valentin talks about this a lot, the research and development. It's okay to try things and they don't work. Then you learn and you try something else. You don't stop trying things. You don't, well, I guess we're just going to go back to making it up as we go, so that it's to have strategy, to have plans. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and then you retool and do it again. So,
man, that is absolutely awesome. I want to throw kind of a curveball, because I know we've been talking through this, but I really want to ask you about something. I know you're in some stuff with Bethel and things of that nature. So you have really been, that's one of the things I loved about, getting to know you all. You've really embraced community, right? And being in these like-minded spaces. If you were talking to a pastor who is somewhere in a city, in a town, in a church, and is really struggling by themselves, trying to figure it out, they're trying to wrestle through it. Maybe they're a part of a denomination, but they feel like an anomaly. Or maybe they're surrounded by people, but they feel alone. How would you communicate the value of community
Okay, so particularly the value of a community like what you're building. Let's see if I can break it down. If I'm a part of a denomination, and even if it's one that I fit in very well, okay, because some people are in that situation. I fit well in the denomination. I've got good relationships with the people I'm in this structure with. I don't care what they tell you, because I know they mean well, but I don't care what they tell you. You can't be yourself on certain levels because you might get fired or you might get frowned upon. There's always the fear of that. And
Yeah.
so when it comes to being plugged into communities like this, you need to have it. We have to have places that are safe where they're not trying to fire you, they're not trying to ruin your life over whatever you might be going through. They're just there to help. They're just there to love you. They're just there to say, hey man, I get it and it's okay, and let me point you to Jesus. And that's just somebody to some as in our line of work, it seems like anybody we're talking to, there's a perpetual outflow. I have people in life that are not an outflow. I have to have people in my life that are not an outflow, and they don't stress me out that I feel like I have to like perform or live up to certain standards. I've got to have people in my life that I can just be like, listen, what you see is what you get. And it keeps me accountable because I need people in my life. Some of the pastors I've seen that I've loved dearly that have spun out have not been in a community like that. And when they have bad ideas, they don't have anybody to tell them it's not a good idea.
Yes. Man, that is so good, man. To Ian, for your insight, man. It's just been such a joy to have this. And that's one of the things I do love about what we're building is that it's a two-way thing. There have been times where I've been able to be an encouragement to you, but there's been times where you've been an encouragement. And I think that to me is just such a joy. And so thank you for joining me. And thank you for being a
Yeah,
part of this. Look, I want to say to a pastor out there, you don't have to do this by yourself. As a matter of fact, I want to extend to you an opportunity to be a part of a community that can walk with you, care for you, love you, and help you move forward in what God has called you to do. So to summarize this episode, burnout is a very, very real issue, but you can get through it with some intentionality. You've got to get serious about putting some boundaries in place. You've got to get serious about taking some unnecessary things and some things that you really don't want to let go off of your plate, but you've really got to get serious about getting some help. You've got to get serious about not walking this journey alone. I've learned in my own bouts with burnout and with my own struggles, I've learned that sometimes it's not about always having somebody who solves a problem, but it's about having somebody who is there. Right. And I want you, if you're in that space and you're still, know that there's more meat on the bone, you still want to keep recovering, you want to come out of this silent struggle, then I want to challenge you to go to our website at getchurchsystems.com. And I really want you to explore the Church Systems Bootcamp, because in that bootcamp, you get the best of both worlds. You get to not be alone. So you get to be a part of a community that can walk with you, that can talk with you. The thing I love, I saw two of our pastors just a couple of weeks ago. One of our pastors from Florida was at the wedding of the daughter of one of our pastors from Pennsylvania. And that just did my heart great, because that connection was created within the boot camp, and it's creating these lifelong bonds where you don't have to do life and ministry alone. But then the second thing is, we're going to help take some of those things off your plate. We're going to help give you some of the tools that you need to really move forward and to really go ahead. All right. So take a moment, go and check out getchurchsystems.com and plug into the Church Systems Bootcamp, because I think it's going to be amazing. All right. I want you to stay tuned, because in our next episode, we're going to be talking about synchronizing gears. We're going to be talking about how you can make sure that you and your team are aligned to your vision. You know as well as I know that it only takes one person who's out of sync to start holding up progress in the ministry, to start holding up progress in the church. And so I'm going to show you how to navigate navigate that, and how to begin to get around it, and really 3 conversations that you need to have about every leader who's on your team every single year so you can make sure you keep those gears aligned. All right, listen, I'm super excited about what God is going to do in your church, and I'm super excited to have you be a part of this journey with us and for us to be a part of it with you. All right, until next time, keep the gears turning. Peace.